right, I'll call the meeting to order at exactly 6:30, and I'll let Eric take the roll.
Okay, Chair Cash Parker.
Here.
Hold on a second. I'm getting Lauren Cooper.
Here.
Alexandra Duke.
Here.
Joe Fergola. Ken Chu. Here. Melinda Ellswick.
You turned off your mic on your computer? Melinda's not here if you want to. Like looking at the screen. I don't know what's getting
I don't know.
It's distracting.
Oh, that's your bag.
Here. I think that's okay. So for staff members, there's Eric Sampson, Planner 2 with the City of Inglewood, and Brian Isom is the Planning Manager for City of Inglewood. And Council Member Wright is absent. Okay, back to you, Cash.
Approval of the minutes from May 15th of 2024, which was our last meeting. Is there a motion to approve those or any discussion?
Motion to approve?
Ken move to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Do we need 4 to approve?
That is correct.
That might need to be tabled.
Okay, do we need a motion to table it? I think we do, right?
Yeah, I don't see anybody else has hopped on yet. So
Okay, so I think that can be, is there a motion to table the minutes until we have the approval of the minutes until we have sufficient people here who were present at the May 15th meeting to approve it?
Motion to table?
Is there a second?
I'll second.
I think that motion carries with just a second, if I'm not mistaken, so that'll be tabled. Public forum, I don't see anyone here from the public in person. Is there anyone online, Eric? I don't see anyone. I do not see anyone. We do have a new commissioner here. It's not on the agenda. Is it okay if we do just an introduction of our new commissioner and the other commissioners who are present? Is that acceptable?
Yeah.
It's just a little bit out of order. Alex, you want to introduce yourself? We can, those that are here, introduce ourselves. We kind of did this off the record. I'm Cash Parker. I'm the chair. I've been on the commission since I don't remember when, I think 2017 I've been on the commission, pretty soon after it was formed. I've been living in Inglewood for 8 years, since 2016. I'm a Colorado native. I grew up in Longmont. I am an attorney by training and occupation, I guess. So if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, and then Ken and Lauren can introduce themselves as well.
Sure. My name's Alex Dukeman. I've lived in Inglewood for almost 4 years now. I was in Denver before that. I grew up in Huntsville, Alabama, and I came out here for grad school and just couldn't leave. I'm a structural engineer by training, and I recently actually started a new job, so that's really exciting. I participated in the 2024 cohort of Elevate Inglewood. That's kind of what got me more interested in getting involved.
Great.
So I'm happy to be here.
Welcome. Happy to have you. Ken, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Ken Chu, and I have been on this committee since for 2 years, and I've been here in Inglewood for 4 years, and I work in affordable housing.
And I'm Lauren Cooper. I've been part of the commission for 2016, and I've lived in Inglewood since 15, I think. And I work in historic preservation, so.
Very cool.
Yeah, so Lauren knows a lot about the stuff that we have. She's always the expert we have to turn to when we're trying to answer questions on this commission. Yeah, so welcome. There's some folks have been on this commission for a long time. You've been here since the beginning, and Matt and Linda, I think, have all been here since the beginning, which was 20.
I think it was
2016?
Yeah.
That sounds right. And then there's 3 newer folks like yourself. So yeah, it's kind of a blend now. It had been a lot of people who'd been on for a while, but it's now sort of a mix of people who've been around for a while and newer people. So, yeah, good. Well, thank you, and again, welcome. Appreciate you joining us. So, the first item on, I guess, the agenda is the Historic Preservation Commission meeting schedule, and it's a little bit more broad than just that item. So, what we wanted to discuss a little bit after I've talked with staff is how we run our meetings, how we schedule them going forward now that we are a quasi-judicial board and have the ability to recommend approval or denial of historic landmarks. So, Alex, just as background for you, this commission until fall of last year was more advisory in nature. We didn't actually have the ability to recommend approvals of districts or buildings or sites being designated as historic landmarks. And we as a commission spent a lot of time putting together a recommended ordinance to the city council to give us the ability to do that, as most municipalities have that ability around the metro area and on the Front Range. And as part of the updates to Title 16, also known as Code Next, which you may have heard about last year, the city council approved the ordinance that we put together with not very many changes. And so that was significant for us because that changed what our board, what our commission can actually do, which is folks can actually apply for historic designations and we can recommend approval or denial of those applications, and then council has to vote on it. Council ultimately has the say of whether something is designated as a historic landmark or not, but we get to approve or deny those in terms of a recommendation. And so that also changed how this board functions, how this commission functions, because that impacts property rights, because if you have a designated historic landmark, you can't alter that landmark without a certificate of approval, a variance essentially, which also comes to this commission for a recommendation for approval or denial before it goes to council. And so as a result, the members of this commission also can have communications with people either advocating for or against certain properties or districts or whatever it might be being approved or denied as landmarks. We're restricted in what we can say to the public because it all has to happen in a public hearing like this one, where with the open meetings laws and CORA, the Open Records Act, it all has to happen in this forum. So in the past, and Lauren, you've been around longer than I have, our meetings have been conducted in a somewhat informal manner when the commission was more advisory in nature. But now that we are not that, you know, again, in talking with staff and Brian and Eric, I'm sure we'll have additional comments about this once I'm done and their experience dealing with other boards and commissions that have similar authority and powers. It's important that we have our meetings have more structure and formality to them, because if there's a challenge to a landmark designation or a rejection of a designation, legal challenge, a lawsuit, then how these meetings are conducted, and these meetings being conducted in a consistent fashion, that could become an issue down the road. So that's the biggest reason that there needs to be a little bit of a change and a little bit more formality. Efficiency is another reason to do that, and obviously the folks from the city staff, they are great and are always here to help us, but they don't get paid overtime to be here. They're doing this because they're committed to their jobs and committed to Inglewood and committed to doing the right thing with boards and commissions that they work with, but we need to make sure we're not taking up too much of their time. So as a practical matter, what does that mean? Well, one, again, with the meetings, we have to be a little bit more wed to the agenda, let's just put it that way, and keeping our discussions hemmed in to the items that are on the agenda and not getting too far afield. Two, city staff, because this is what they do, and Eric and Brian will talk more about this, this is what they do with other boards and commissions. Rather than me making the agendas, which has been the practice, and I know you've been chair in the past, Lauren, where the chair prepares the agendas, these folks are doing that now, and I approve them, which is what they do with other boards and commissions. And so that makes the agendas a little bit tighter. Three, that also means if we're asking staff for something to follow up on something, or we have questions, it's not necessarily going to carry over month after month after month like it has in the past, where we've sort of discussed an item 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. If it's a staff item, it's going to be a situation where they're going to get the information or take whatever action we're asking them to, and when it's completed, come back to us versus it being piecemeal. And then 4, if commissioners want something on the agenda or have specific questions for staff, that should be in commissioner's choice. So commissioner's choice is always at the end of every agenda. And you can still bring up items like historic Inglewood is having this event at this time. That's fine. But if you want something on the agenda, like next month, we should talk about X, Y, or Z. We should have a working session about X, Y, or Z. That should be brought up during commissioner's choice. Or I would like to ask staff what is being done in terms of communications about the landmark designation process. That is the time to have those questions posed to staff. And this is, again, my understanding. I've learned more about it from talking with Brian and Eric, and also I did the citizens, what was it called? The Citizens Planning School?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did that, and I interacted with some folks from other boards on that. And again, this is how these other boards and commissions that are quasi-judicial and have the ability to vote on things that impact property rights, this is how they operate. And then the other thing is, like has happened the last 2 months, if we don't have business, we're not going to have a meeting, because there's no reason to bring all of us in here. There's no reason to bring Brian and Eric in here if we don't have business. And I think the practice in the past, up until really, I guess, the last couple of months, was we had a meeting regardless if there were business items. And if there's business every month, great, and especially great if people are submitting landmark designations every month. We'll meet every month if we have to, but we don't have to. And again, Brian and Eric can talk about this, but other boards and commissions, that's how they work, is like they often have off months because there's not anything to vote on. So I think I've covered everything. I want to invite Eric and Brian to give the overview of their experience with other boards and commissions to sort of enlighten why this is the process that's best for us to follow with this commission. So I'll turn it over to you guys for a comment.
Can I ask just a quick
Sure.
question while it's on my mind?
Yeah.
As far as like asking for things to be put on the agenda, what if we don't know it at the end of the meeting and it comes to us like a week later, we think, oh, that would be important to put on the agenda? Like, then we just
You can
email Eric?
email me.
Okay.
You can
Okay.
reach out to us. What I would say is it may not end up on the very next agenda.
Mhm.
Because if it's something that we have to put together a bunch of information for, we want to make sure that whatever we're giving you is complete.
Mhm. Okay.
Probably the most recent one that I can think of is the letter that we sent out to homeowners.
Mhm.
For us, it's like hitting a moving target when the letter has to change every meeting. And we go through and review and revise and review and revise. Then if we've sent it out to get vetted through our legal department or other departments, we have to say, hold on, we have to pull that back and get a new letter and send it back.
Okay.
And then pull back. So we want to make sure that whatever we're getting you is complete
Mhm.
and done. We've got, as we do in all of our other boards and commissions, I think we've got our process built out in our iCompass system. iCompass? It's how we track staff reports, communications that go out to our boards and commissions. We put all of the information in there. So I think we've got it built out to work through our Historic Preservation Commission. It's normally geared towards when you guys would see a case. But we also use it to put our study session items in there. And that helps us too, because we have logs of things that we present. And when we do things very informally, they don't always get logged very well. So we want to make sure that everything we're doing is on our agenda. We have links to it. We have it all stored in our logs. But yes, if there's something that you have at Commissioner's Choice, you can bring it up. If there's other things, and we do this with our other boards and commissions where we'll get an email from a commissioner that says, hey, we might need to talk about this topic. So they might bring it up in the next Commissioner's Choice to ask everybody else if there needs to be a study session, or we'll bring it up during our staff's choice. So we got an email, we want to talk about this. Is this something you want us to bring back to you as a study session item? Or You know, if there's a time where you feel like the ordinance needs to be looked at again, or I think one we'll talk about here in a few minutes is CLG. That'll also be something that we can bring back as a bigger study session item once we get a little bit more concrete information. But yeah, Cash is right. This is how our boards and commissions function. We don't meet. I think we have some statutory requirements that we might have to meet once a quarter at the very least for this commission. I think this commission is one that has one. That even if we don't have cases, we do have a certain amount of times we have to meet per year. So if we do have that, then we'll make sure that we meet those guidelines. But in some instances, it can also be very hard to keep a commission of commission members when we meet, but we're not doing business. I've worked in different commissions in different cities and different states, and sometimes people feel like they're not accomplishing anything if we just meet to meet. So we want to make sure that we keep people on our commissions, and that if people do leave, we have a healthy group of people that are trying to get into the commission.
And the other commissions that work similarly to this, Brian, are planning and zoning.
And Board of Adjustment and Appeals.
Right.
Those are the two biggest ones that we work with all the time, and I'm the liaison to both of those from our staff. You know, Board of Adjustment and Appeals, we actually just rewrote our entire development code so that we would take less things to them, because we don't necessarily want people to do a variance.
For those that may not be familiar, Brian, explain what the Board of Adjustment Appeals does.
So they're the quasi-judicial board that sees variances or exceptions to our zoning code. So we went through a two-year process to rewrite the zoning code, and a 5-year process before that to study it and do a lot of public outreach on what our new zoning code needs to look like. And the whole idea behind the zoning code or development code is to really build in functionality for staff to achieve things without necessarily having to go to the Board of Adjustment and Appeals to say, hey, our code's not right. The Board of Adjustment and Appeals really sees cases that have kind of a hardship. That means, you know, there's something physically different about this property versus every other property that makes it really difficult to stick to the rules. So they have to see some kind of exception. With you all, it's more of there's a property owner that wants to designate their property for its historic, I always would like to say historicness, I don't know, but the historic attributes. Historic character, historic attributes that they want to get it designated. So those are the cases that you all would hear. Our Planning and Zoning Commission, they hear cases on somebody trying to rezone their property or just do a major subdivision, which requires public land dedication, meaning streets or parks. So each group sees a different alley, but they're all pretty similar in how they operate. The other two boards, they both do the same thing. If there's something that they want to see, we'll schedule it in a study session. Study sessions are a little bit more informal. You'll get a staff presentation. You'll generally have a communication from us that kind of details what we've done on the topic, or if there's any questions that we have for people, we usually will have our presentations attached to it too, so you can see things ahead of the meetings. You're not just waiting for the meeting for us to present items. We like to get it out ahead of time. And then the discussion is much more informal during study sessions. We're not necessarily taking a vote on any items. We might get a show of hands on which direction we want to go, but it's not an official vote on this is what we're approving or denying right now. This is just kind of getting the direction.
It's like council study sessions. Like I think probably at least some of us have been to council study sessions where they take consensus votes on things typically, but they're not binding or formal. So that might be something we do in the future if there's like a specific topic where it's like, okay, well, let's have a study session on maybe it's CLG recommendation or something like that moving forward, where it's we don't need to have a formal meeting with votes, but we could have a study session 1 month in lieu of that, right? And I don't know the answer to this question. Study sessions, do we have to vote on calling a study session in a meeting like this for that to happen? Or we can just say, just as a for instance, next month is a study session. We can just designate it that way.
We wouldn't do that right now because we're still waiting. We have kind of a submittal deadline of when projects would need to be submitted and reviewed by to get on the next meeting. Because what we do is we see a meeting like today, we have to start working backwards because there's public notification that has to happen. Either, depending on the meeting type, we have to either post a sign on the property. The applicant has to send out a mailer. In the case of HPC, they just have to post a sign. But others, they have to send out a mailer. We have to publish things in the newspaper. So we have to work backwards through deadlines. And I don't know that our deadlines they're around 20-ish days. The media notices have to publish 15 days ahead. We have to get it to the paper like 5 days before that. We have to get it to our administrative staff about 2 days before that. So we have a lot of internal deadlines that don't line up exactly with today. So we may not know if we have a case yet, but we'll know usually by like the end of next week or the week after. But if there's an item, say tonight we go through and there's an item that we want to put on a study session for next week, we can start discussing what we'll do. If we choose to put it on there, we're happy to, and then we can work internally about getting that information ready for the next meeting.
Yeah, since we have that power in the ordinance now, we're kind of in the same bucket as planning and zoning and board of adjustment appeals. And I think those are the three, right? Like us and those two are the three that have the quasi judicial function that can impact property rights.
Yeah, there are others. There's the Water and Sewer Board can do waivers of some of their code. Other boards and commissions have additional abilities that are fairly similar, and they operate very similarly. They have business items and action items, and then they have study session items. And you know, you have to call a public hearing for the action items, the public hearings for new district landmarks or landmark designations. And then study session items is generally like agenda item C is going to be X, and we just go through it. There's not necessarily having to call for anything on those. Do you have any questions about?
Yeah,
Any of
questions
that?
or discussion.
So let's just start doing it and then maybe the questions will come.
Yeah.
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 You know, in the winter and other times of year, especially coming back to in-person meetings, not everybody always wants to participate in meetings, and I think this kind of helps bring it back in and saying that we will only meet when we have business. To me, that makes it a lot more important that we meet when there's business that needs to occur, not necessarily just meeting every month to meet to talk about things.
And I guess when you say business, is that like we're going to be voting on something or just very?
It may be a study session item,
Okay.
but when I say business, I'm normally meaning items that are actionable. So things
Okay.
like historic designations. I will tell you, we still don't have any applications, but we're hoping that they will start coming in at some point. And hopefully after this next discussion, we can maybe get some. The next agenda item discussion.
So I think to expand on what Brian said, Lauren, the answer is we don't necessarily have to have a landmark application. That's not like we must have one to have a meeting. We can still have meetings to discuss things, but it's not just how it's been in the past where it's like items just sort of carried over month to month, which is what I did with the agendas too, just because that's sort of how it had always been done, which doesn't mean it's a good reason to do something, but nevertheless, that's what I did. But that's not going to be like, just because we discussed, let's say for instance, like the plaques, I think we did discuss that on May 15th. We don't need to have another meeting the following month just to get an update on that unless something significant has changed. But like the next item on the agenda, CLG and Next Steps, I mean, that's something, whether it's a study session or a further meeting for more discussion with what we want to do with that and recommending it to council or that type of thing, that could very well be a business item that's not voting on a landmark application, but it's a business item that merits a discussion and having a meeting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
So, other questions or discussion about that topic? All right, good. Any other comments or thoughts from Eric, Brian, esteemed staff?
None really. We're here to help and just kind of help guide and direct, you know, the group to make sure that we're making the right decisions. You know, you'll get recommendations for us on the cases, but we're also here to help make sure that our meetings run in a manner that if we ever are challenged, we're lining it up, right?
Yeah, because while council ultimately makes the decision, because we're making the recommendation one way or another, that could be a situation where there could be a challenge down the road, and there could be a look into how we've been running meetings and how we've been considering applications and that sort of thing.
And first thing they usually look at is a due process issue. So did we follow the right rules on the right directions? Going through our own process. So that usually gets looked at very first in a case like that. So we want to make sure that we're just following our own rules through our own direction, and we're setting this thing up to be very successful.
Well, I guess speaking of that, I mean, do we need to be more well-versed in Robert's rules?
So what we would likely do is schedule our attorney to come in, and they've given a study session to, now that we have a new member, they've given a study session to our Planning and Zoning Commission and one to our Board of Adjustment and Appeals. Talks about Bob's Rules of Order, what meetings should look like, what we do, why we do what we do, and how we do it, and how we operate. So we can work on scheduling a study session with Sergio to come in and talk to you. I think he's given a presentation recently.
He's given a couple on the ex parte communication and the quasi-judicial nature of the board. I don't know that we've done Bob's rules as part of that because we've been sort of caught up in the quasi-judicial stuff. But I mean, the good news is the Bob's rules are a highly simplified version of Robert's Rules of Order and are much easier, I think, to navigate. But you're still in good stead for due process reasons if you're following Bob's rules, because that's spelled out somewhere, and I can't think of it off the top of my head. Somewhere in the city ordinances, it says that the boards and commissions can follow Bob's rules, and that's, I think I'm sure every city does it that way, because Robert's rules are so complicated and voluminous, and I think are only used in like Congress, of course. That's one reason they probably never get much done.
Just a question about that. When I first joined the commission, there was like a citywide training, or not citywide, but there was a training for all commission members on Bob's Rules of Order. Do they not do that anymore?
I will check with the city clerk's office. I don't know if there's something that you get when we have a new member. Did you have to get any training?
I got a PDF and I signed that I read it.
That you would support and defend the Constitution and all that, yeah.
We'll check with our city clerk's office.
I remember that happening too. I don't remember that happening recently.
Yeah, same. Not that it needs to, but it could just save Sergio from coming to yet another one of our meetings.
I know it may be blending two cities together, so it might have been my previous one where they had a video training that was conducted and it talked about both ex parte communication and Bob's Rules of Order and things like that. But I'm gonna bet that was probably the previous.
I don't remember that.
You have questions or discussion before we leave that topic? Brian, Eric, anything else? Okay, great. The next topic is the CLG, the Certified Local Government topic. And rather than butcher it, I'm just going to ask Lauren to explain what a certified local
I wanted
government
to hop in
is.
first to
Please.
preface things.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I don't know if you noticed that we did get the notification out that we have the process in place in the utility mailer, that the mini magazine that went out. And so we've gotten 2 phone calls about it since then. The one I'm actually kind of surprised that they haven't applied yet because they seemed really gung-ho about it. But I sent them all the information, and that was about a week after we had sent out the mailer. I haven't heard anything since, and then I had an inquiry come in today that I haven't had a chance to respond to them yet. The people who I had spoken with in the past were really showing interest, and then they asked, well, is there any sort of tax credit I can get? And then we're like, fortunately, no, because don't have the CLG status yet. And so some of them were that kind of, you could tell the wind went out of their sails a little bit once I kind of explained that to them. And so I think now that we have the enabling legislation in place for us to do like a historic preservation commission thing and recommend properties for historic designations. I think it's probably a good time that we can look at moving forward with maybe becoming and obtaining CLG status. And really that is the point of the agenda item tonight, is to discuss with you all kind of how you feel about that, what our next steps might be. I really think the next step will probably be going with a study session before City Council some night to see what their reaction is. Some of you may remember when it was first brought to council, it was probably been 6 years. Yeah. We had a different council at the time, and they weren't very favorable towards the CLG status. One, I think there was a lot of misinformation about what a CLG actually is. And I think that was the largest part of why there was some pushback about it. But the council at that time did not want us to pursue any sort of CLG action. But now that we have this in place, I guess let's just take it from there.
Yeah, and again, Lauren, thanks, Eric, I appreciate that. Not to put you on the spot, but if you would tell us what a CLG is and what the city council, not us, we can't do it, would have to do from here for us to become a CLG, just roughly, again, not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, to be honest, okay, let's start with what a CLG is. Yeah, Certified Local Government. It's like the designation from, I believe it's ultimately the National Park Service. And it's just recognizing that as a municipality, whether that's city, county, or whatever, we are taking steps to preserve our historic buildings, our historic resources. And so there's a list of things that you need, and it's an ordinance, which we have, the Historic Preservation Ordinance. You have to maintain a survey, and there's some specifics with that, but a survey of the historic properties in your community. You have to submit an annual report, just kind of what's happening. Did you have new landmark designations? Did you survey new properties, such and such? And then the big thing though is that they give you grant money to conduct those surveys or various other projects. I don't know the details of those, but I know the survey is the big one, and that just helps you maintain a record of what resources in your community are historic. And so there is a CLG coordinator at the State Historic Preservation Office that kind of oversees the program and helps manage it, helps work with local communities. The current one is Lindsay Flewelling, and she came and spoke to the commission. Was that like last fall?
I think it was almost
About a year
Okay.
ago.
Just to kind of give an overview of it. And yeah, as far as how to actually do it, I think we just applied through her. I could look it up really quickly about what would need to be done. But yeah, there's some sort of application and approval process, and they would just have to make sure that, we have all of the things in place to become a CLG.
Right.
So.
It seems to me like it would be it would be a good idea to get in front of council at some point and actually recommend that, because being a CLG, to Eric's point, opens up some tax credits for people that get landmark designations, right? And I don't know if that's state or national or both, but
I think it's just state, but I don't know as much about the tax credits.
Yeah.
So,
right,
yeah,
right.
yeah. Or at least with the state tax credits. But yeah.
Yeah. So it's mostly different people on council, almost entirely, I think, except one from maybe two from when that was discussed last time. So it probably makes sense. We certainly have to figure out, what has to be done if we become a CLG. The things you talked about, the survey and the annual report and all of that. And I mean, council would have to pass, I don't think an ordinance, but probably like a resolution approving applying for it is probably how that would have to happen. If you guys know, feel free to chime in. I'm not trying to put you guys on the spot, but I would imagine that's probably how that has to take place.
So I'm sorry, I found a quick list of
Yeah.
requirements and benefits.
Yeah, by all means.
So, yeah, obligations, enact and enforce a local ordinance, which we have. Create a commission, we have that. At least one commission member must attend and approve educational or training event each year, maintain a system for survey and inventory of properties, provide opportunities for public participation and local preservation efforts. So that might be something we would need to work on, and then review and provide comment on National Register nominations submitted within our jurisdiction. So that one's pretty. And then the benefits, grant funding with no cash match, technical support from SHPO and National Park Service. We can join national organizations such as the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions, CLG exclusive training and networking opportunities, review of tax credit projects that might be happening in Inglewood, and then additionally you qualify for a 20% state historic preservation tax credits. And then just some intangible benefits here, assist in promoting tourism, community heritage, et cetera. So, sorry to interrupt.
No, that's perfect. Yeah, that's great. It seems to me that, in looking around, I think we've had this discussion before in this commission, most every city, like on the Front Range at least, is a CLG. So it's not, this is just thinking ahead to presenting it to council, which, as Eric or Brian or both of you said, I think there was just some misinformation last time. I don't view it as a political thing because there's cities that are right and left on the political spectrum on the Front Range that are CLGs, because it's just, and it doesn't change anything about anyone's property rights because it's still the voluntary process for being designated, having landmark designation and all that, it would remain unchanged. So it would be at the discretion of the property owner still. So I think that was some of the misinformation last time, is just, people could force landmark designations on properties they don't own, and that's not how our ordinance is structured, and I'm sure probably never will be. But the CLG component, it sounds like it's fairly minimal obligations on the city, plus there's grant money to take care of the obligations, or at least some of them, like the survey part of it, right? That's part of what you get the grant money to do. So it seems reasonable to get that in front of council and promote it as, it would make tax credits open to property owners. I'd like to hear other people's thoughts. I would like to hear, and I don't know if it's something that the city attorney's office needs to look into and research, which is, I think before we go to council, their first question is going to be, what are the benefits, understandably, what are the benefits to citizens of Inglewood, which is the specifics about the tax credits and how does that work and what does that open up for people in getting these landmark designations. That's what council will want to know, is how it's going to benefit us. Again, I would have the same question if I were on council. So anyway, those are my thoughts, and I'd love to hear all of your thoughts on that topic about how we approach that next.
Was anyone here when that was presented to council last?
I was.
I know.
That was right before I.
It might have been right before I was on the commission too.
I was, but
And also at the time, though, I remember that they were, Cass kind of jogged my memory on this, that they were spooked because that Denver has that hostile designation
Yes.
for historic properties.
And
And I do believe that there was a pretty big case at that time with
Yeah.
a diner,
Tom's
potentially.
Diner on Colfax.
Yeah.
The family had owned that diner for 50 years or something like that. And they were selling it to a developer who wanted to put up an apartment complex. And it was like their perspective was, this is our nest egg to sell this. And it's a 1970s building and it's not really historic, was their perspective. And then someone else, a non-owner of the property, attempted to impose a landmark designation. And then I think there were lawsuits, and it was settled and resolved, but it was a big, nasty fight. And that was all going on about the time that there was this discussion in front of the Inglewood City Council. Even though, again, then we didn't even have an ordinance that permitted a landmark designation, and we do now, and it's very explicit that the property owner has to consent to the landmark being designated. that situation could not occur legally in Inglewood, the way our ordinance is structured. So.
Just kind of dovetailing off of that and additional benefits of it is through those surveys, it could help, even though that sort of issue wouldn't happen because we require owner consent, it could help the potential for that issue, if you will, because if we do a survey and we say, okay, like these are the buildings that aren't historic in Inglewood, these are the buildings, or aren't potentially historic, these are the buildings that are potentially historic or eligible for the National Register, then that helps kind of create that divide of, you know, someone wants to say that this property is historic, but the survey has already determined that it's likely not historic, if that makes sense. So that's another way that those surveys can benefit.
Yeah. Sure.
That designation happened. I mean, there are responsibilities, like, does that just become a responsibility of the staff, or is that stuff that we would have to do?
A lot of it becomes our responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're creating more work for you guys. You're welcome.
Job security.
Yeah.
But if somebody wanted to make changes to the exterior of their property as per our ordinance, then they would come to you for a certificate of appropriateness that you would become an advisory review board in that capacity as well.
So like conducting the surveys, we did that 2 years ago.
Right.
I know that one was just getting completed when I started with Pinion. Did a community-wide survey, identified a ton of buildings. It wouldn't be what we had been doing for the last year or so, where I think you all went out and started identifying additional buildings or doing things like that. So this designation could give us the monies, you know, grant monies that we could hire a consultant to go do that work. We're not having to do it internally. So this gives us a lot more options than we've really ever had in the past. We've already taken step one with getting the designation ordinance adopted in Code Next. And now this to us is the most logical step too. Because when we talk to people, we do feel like this is what the missing piece is, you know. With a state designation or a national historic designation, you get generally, or at least national, I know you get, you know, tax dollars or incentives to do things like that. The local designation just says, the only thing that you can't do is tear it down or alter it without coming to this commission. So I think people are looking for that added bonus of, well, let me get, you know, additional money for renovations that I might need to do, or to do this or to do that, and then I'll kind of think about it.
And the surveys that are required, it's not specific to annual or anything like that, right? It's just like you regularly have to be doing surveys.
Yeah, the way it's phrased, and I'm sure there's
Said
nuance
annually,
to it. Well, and
There's a report, you have to do a report annually of some kind, right?
there is an annual report and then maintain a system for survey and inventory. So I think it's how we define that system or create that system. But they, you know, I think the idea is that you are regularly surveying your historic resources as capacity or funding or whatever. So, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah, that's what that sounds like to me. Is it's like it's not on a set timetable. It's just you have to be doing it regularly. You have some system that provides for it to be done. Because like the Pinion survey that was 2 years ago, I doubt a ton has changed. I mean, some things might have been knocked down, but I doubt a ton has changed in terms of what would show up as historic or not if there was a survey today, right?
Yes, with the Pinion survey though, it was a little bit different in that it was a survey plan versus a full-on survey. With a full-on survey, it's like, you know, they kind of did an overview, like, okay, just based on like a desktop search, these properties might be historic. Well, this would like really dive into each one and say like, or, you know, it would maybe like look at a whole neighborhood or something, or a whole like downtown area, and like, okay, these are the buildings. We're really going to look at the architectural characteristics of each. We're going to go into, you know, a brief like owner record and see, you know, were there any significant owners? If it's a business, were there any like significant businesses that were there in the past? It would be like a more in-depth dive into each one to determine would it be eligible for that local, state, or national register listing?
Just trying to look at, there's 67 CLGs according to the,
There's 120 cities that have an ordinance,
Ordinance.
and then 67 of those are designated.
one of them is Littleton, one of them is Lakewood, one of them is Denver. These are CLGs. One of them is Aurora. So like these are Littleton and Lakewood and Denver are all neighboring cities. Aurora almost is. So these are all cities nearby. Castle Rock is one. Elizabeth is one. Golden is one. Westminster is one. And these are all, again, those are politically diverse municipalities in many ways. Fort Lupton is one. Brighton is one. So I mean, what I would like to understand, and again, I don't know if this is a city attorney project and for staff, is it would be nice to know, like I said, as we go forward, and I don't know if this is a working session for next month to discuss this further, but to understand what the obligations are and how they're being met. And you would think that someone in one of these many neighboring cities that's a CLG could say, this is what we have to do every year, and this is how we do it.
The state rep is also a great resource. We've talked to her on the phone
Sure.
a couple of times.
Yeah.
And she said she's happy to come in and meet with you all and kind of talk through what it takes.
Perhaps that's the answer to get her back to have a concrete discussion. Because yeah, if we go to council, they'll want to know, what do we have to do and what's the benefit? And having a full understanding of those two aspects of it, I think, is important.
Go on.
Essentially also understanding is that grant money actually adequate to do what we need to do.
That's also a good point.
Yeah.
Especially if you're hiring a consultant.
Because council will ask that question, what's it going to cost?
Yeah, it's gonna cost us anything.
Yeah, there are no match grants, so, we just get the money. But back to the certification process, here's just a brief overview. Submit a certification packet with a draft ordinance. Actually, now that I'm really reading this, it's not that detailed, but there is more information on the Colorado State Preservation Office website, so.
But yeah, to Brian, I can't remember if it was Eric or Brian who said it, or both of you, but to your earlier point, we're a lot of the way there because our ordinance, because we wrote it over a really long time in this commission, is taken from CLG ordinances. So our ordinance pretty much matches the CLGs already. So we wouldn't have to do anything else there, I don't think, to get to have the right things in the ordinance to get a CLG designation. Because it's like, I forget, it might have been Lakewoods. It's been so long because Jason and I both worked on it, starting with something. It might have been Lakewoods or Goldens that we kind of started with, and then we mixed some pieces from others. But yeah, and it's all CLG. It's all from municipalities that had CLG. Because I think we were wise enough when we were doing that if we're going to try to pass an ordinance, let's get one that gets over the CLG bar, so we don't have to have that revised again if this comes. So I think we're ahead of the game on that a little bit. So I mean, Eric, Brian, what do you guys think? Is that a study session topic? Should we get the state person in next month? What do you think about that?
Yeah, we can shoot for next month.
Yeah.
If not, we'll let you know and we'll get it at the very latest the month after. But
Do a study
we'll try to
session.
get all the information that we need for, so the state has a book, they have a couple of handbooks that we'll go through. The Colorado Certified Local Government Handbook is one, and then it references this Colorado Cultural Resource Survey Manual, which tells us how we have to conduct surveys and what kind of information we need on those. So they can give us a lot more detail on what this group will need to do. as well as what we will need to do as staff. And we can come back with, I really wish I could remember her name, Lindsay, to talk to you all about that. I think we could probably get that by next month.
Okay. I do, yeah, I mean, I agree with you guys. I think it's a good time to bring that to council if we can right now and present it, I mean, rightfully is something that's beneficial because it gives more benefit to actually seeking a landmark designation because it opens up some other things and we understand more specifics about that. But yeah, I think that's a good thing to do. So, is there any
that
other?
a presentation that like you would do or Eric would do or Brian would do?
Probably for the city council study session.
So generally staff, and then we usually will take the chair of whatever commission or board is there. But then the other board members are all welcome to be there to provide additional comments if they want to.
That's.
Or at least to just bring moral support.
Yeah, that's what we did on the ordinance. I think, Brian, you took the lead on kind of walking them through that in a study session on our ordinance proposal. And then we were both available to field questions, and the only ones were about the threshold for a district designation, the percentage. And that was pretty much the only questions we took on that. So I think it would be similar where Brian would take the lead on presenting it, and then we would
It sounds
field
like
questions about it.
we'll need a very succinct communication to make sure that the right information is getting out and it's all.
Yeah, and that's why
highlighting the benefits of the program.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. Yeah, that's what we need to understand it to distill it down to like bullet points essentially to present to for Brian to present to council and me to be available to answer questions about it because if you've been to those study sessions, they have a million things on the agenda and you get like 5 to 7 minutes kind of for these kind of items is typically how it goes, which is understandable. They have a lot of different things that they're dealing with, but it's not like you're going to get an hour to chat about it with council. It's kind of how that works. It needs to be like benefits are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, obligations are 1, 2, 3, and they'll be funded by X, Y, Z, like getting it onto one sheet or so of paper or a couple of slides or whatever in a PowerPoint.
And I think it's important, at least from what I read, that we highlight that the obligations that we would have as a group are generally funded by just being a part of the CLG or being the CLG city. So you have obligations that does cost staff time, but we generally get reimbursed doing things from them through grants that we don't have to manage.
Yep.
Which is, to me, is a great selling point. Because a lot of time that's a harder discussion is we might get this grant, but we also have to put money in the pot.
Yeah.
And so if these are no match grants, to me, I think that's a win-win for our staff at least.
But staff are responsible for applying for those grants and managing them.
Which Eric has helped write some grants for the city. John Boberl, who's our long-range planner, does the majority of our grant writing. I think Nancy's worked on a few grants. So we're pretty well versed in grant writing. We're pretty good at it. I don't know that we're the greatest, but we certainly will try to be.
John can make it rain.
John is pretty good. John is really good at it.
Anything else before we leave that topic? Okay. That brings us to staff's choice. Eric or Brian or both of you.
I don't have anything for tonight.
I don't either.
Okay. Commissioner's choice. My only item would be, we discussed it earlier, but the Bob's Rules thing, and that's not like urgent. Whenever Sergio can come and give 15 or 20 minutes on that, I think that's worthwhile. Because we have a couple of new commissioners too. I don't know that we need to I don't want to rehash the whole quasi-judicial presentation, but when you talk with him, it may be worth having a discussion about doing a truncated version of that presentation as well.
Sure.
First, many of those presentations were recorded.
That's right. All our meetings are recorded. That is true. That is a good point. So I can't remember when Sergio was in here last. It's been this year. I know that. tell you exactly when.
Yeah, it was in the spring sometime.
Yeah. But we have not, I know we have not had the Bob's Rules presentation because we were too focused on the quasi judicial nature of the board. So Eric or Brian, I mean, I think you could Google the meetings, but you can find the videos off the city website.
Mhm.
That takes you to a YouTube channel, is that right?
We can email you a link. There's a meetings portal that houses all of the city's public meetings. They're housed by organization or group, so the historic preservation is on there. The meeting that Sergio was at, looks like it was February 21st.
Okay, perfect.
And his presentation is attached as an attachment. You can go back and watch and listen to the video
Okay.
of his presentation.
Thanks for looking that up.
I spent a lot of time in that meetings portal, let me tell you.
I don't have anything else for Commissioner's Choice. I just go around the table. So Alex, do you have anything for Commissioner's Choice?
No.
Ken?
Nothing.
Nothing here.
Okay. I think the table motion that was seconded on the minutes is sufficient to table that until our next meeting because we still, I'll state this for the record, we still do not have a sufficient number of people who were present at the May 15th meeting, a number of commissioners to approve a motion to approve those minutes.
That makes me, that reminds me of a point I was gonna bring up earlier.
Sure.
So with Bob's Rules, you are able to say if you miss a meeting. If you come to the following meeting and we are in a situation like we have now, if you have read the minutes,
That's true.
you can basically say, I wasn't here, but I read the minutes and I, agreed that this is what, these are accurate. And then you can become a voting member on the meeting that you missed.
But let's just leave them until next time. If
Oh,
that
yeah.
being
No,
taken-
because I feared, because Alex is new news.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
I don't want to put that burden on her.
No, I agree with your point for whatever it's worth. You don't have to have been present at the meeting to approve the minutes, but often people stay for that, and this is Alex's first meeting. So we'll leave approval of those minutes to the next time we meet, which will probably be next month, it sounds like.
Yep.
So.
We also are happy to have a new commissioner training. So if you want to come in and just sit down with staff individually, we can talk about kind of what this commission does, how it operates, how we've gotten to the point that we're at. I know tonight was probably a lot of things thrown at you.
Yeah.
We're happy to do that. Just let us know
That could be helpful.
anytime that you have some availability. Eric and I can sit down and go through some of that information with you.
Yeah, and there's really, we don't ever really have paper, so if phone, tablet, computer, if you want to look at the agenda, that's usually how we do it, because we just don't.
Or if you want us to
stuff.
print one out, y'all just let us know. We can print a few out before you get here and have them on the table. I've been here since about 8 o'clock this morning. Eric got some time to leave to go feed animals and come back. For the most part, we're here.
Well, great. I think that brings us to the end. So is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion adjourned?
Second.
I'll second.
All right, that's been moved and seconded, so it means we stand in adjournment at 7:29. Eric?
All right.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Alex,
Nice to
welcome.
meet you. Yeah,
Thank you.
welcome. Thank you.
So would that just be like 30 minutes, an hour that I would swing by, or like how long?
Oh, I don't think, not anything more than 30.
All day.
Yeah.